Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Discovering Dawson's Creek Season 2. Yes, exciting.
Yay!
Finally, after over a
Yes.
year, we're away from Season 1 of
Yes.
Dawson's Creek. We've actually started Seasons 2. We've been on such a good run with
Yeah.
Discovering Dawson's Creek recently. It's very exciting. We're getting into it. We've found a pattern, we've found a rhythm, and that is the best thing about it. But yeah, I mean, I was very excited for season 2 with how season 1 ended. Obviously, we had, in the last episode of Discovering Dawson's Creek, Janine, it was all about the finale
Yeah.
of season 1, a great finale that it really, really was. And I was hoping to see some continuation, a bit of character change going
Mhm.
into season 2. Wasn't quite sure exactly where we would start season 2, and was quite surprised when we started season 2 literally the instant after season 1 ended,
Yeah.
in terms of timeline. But I don't know why I was necessarily expecting certain character growth, because I should have come to realize that Dawson's Creek at
Dawson
this
is the
point,
lead of our show, so character
yes,
growth.
and that Dawson's Creek as a structure likes to go one way and the other way, and then back to the one way, and then back to the other way,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it turns into Cobra Kai, and we don't like that
Yes.
necessarily. So
Well,
I was very annoyed watching particularly the first episode of season
okay.
2, admittedly, but into it, but excited and very happy to have
Yeah.
this discussion that we're going to have today, Janine. Season 2.
Okay.
Do you like season
Yes.
2? Are we to be, am I to be expecting, that didn't make any sense, a good season?
Yes, I think season 2 is solid. A lot of things happen. We get some new
You would
characters
hope that.
coming in. So, yeah, so we have Andy and Jack, brother and sister, coming into the fold of the friend group. So they're going to add an interesting dynamic to things, particularly maybe shake things up with certain characters.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and we get to just see how maybe Dawson and Joey work as a couple because,
Mm,
obviously it is the will they, won't they, and they will they'd. So,
did it?
yes. So we'll get to see how they kind of play out as a couple. We'll get to see more of Pacey maybe getting some encouragement to do better and um
Okay.
have some positivity in his life because we've only really seen these negative aspects of how he's kind of treated and how he sees himself. So we'll get to see a little bit of confidence building for Pacey this season
Good.
as
We like
well.
this.
Yes.
I want
Um,
confidence building for Pacey and confidence stomping into the ground for Mr. Leary, please.
yes. And we'll get to see the Jen we've only heard about, the wild Jen.
Mm,
She'll be kind of slipping back into those crazy ways that we heard about from New York as she starts hanging
yeah.
out with the bad girl that we met in the detention episode, Abby Morgan. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, we saw a little bit of that in the second episode that we're going to
Yes.
be talking about today, obviously. But we will start with season
Yes.
2, episode 1. It's called The Kiss. It takes place right after Dawson and Joey's first extravagant kiss that we saw at the
Yes.
end of the finale of season 1. Janine, the binder is out.
Yes.
Do go ahead.
Yes, okay. The kiss. Where do we go from here? After the moment of truth, when Dawson and Joey seal their passions with a kiss, tensions mount as the two are plagued with doubts and questions as to where to take the relationship. With Joey's impending trip to France and Dawson's lingering feelings for Jen, meanwhile, Jen has difficulty understanding Graham's reaction to her grandfather's death. Pacey clashes with new Cape Side High arrival Andy McPhee, And Mitch and Gail struggle to bring trust back into their marriage. And then it says Nina Rapetta also stars. So I believe that's who plays
Yes.
Bessie. Yes. Um, David, and then it actually says the director. So these synopsises are different synopsises than what I had for the
Mm,
first set. So it
okay.
actually, the pauses were because they have like the actors' names in parentheses next to everything.
Okay.
And then it actually shows who directed the episode and all of that stuff as well. So yeah, these are a little
Facts as well.
far more extensive synopses I have from all of these years ago.
I really, I just think you should open the Dawson's Creek Museum with that binder as the centerpiece. I really do.
Yes.
I think that would perhaps be your calling in life, to go to Massachusetts, coastal Massachusetts, and open a Dawson's Creek memorabilia museum.
Well, actually, it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, so that might be
Well,
why
whether
that
it was filmed in Wilmington, North Carolina, it's not set in Wilmington, North Carolina, is it?
No.
So, shush, because that doesn't even make sense. I've been to Wilmington, North Carolina. You
You
didn't know that,
have?
did you? Yes.
Did you
Or have
go
I
to
been to
any of the
Wilmington, North Carolina? Or have I been to Wilmington, Virginia? There's probably several Wilmingtons. I've been to a Wilmington around that general area.
well, then it would have had to be that one. So you should
Is
have
there
gone to
not
the
one in Virginia?
filming locations in of Dawson's Creek while you were there.
I quite possibly did and just didn't know. But exciting.
Yes, the
Exciting.
kiss.
This is an episode to me that is all about, yes, okay, it's called The Kiss. Joey and Dawson are kissing every which way and constantly throughout the entire thing, and it's very happy. I enjoy seeing Joey smile. We don't see it a lot.
Yeah.
It's nice to see, but in your synopsis you mentioned doubts that they have. Now, I don't think those are overplayed in this episode. I think they're quite
No.
underplayed. They're just like, have we made the right decision? And then immediately they start kissing again, and it's just like, yes, of course we've made the right decision. It's not
Well,
really
yes,
thought of.
no. I do like that they kind of have this weird, awkward conversation after the kiss. Like they don't know what it means. They don't really know what to do. So I like that we get that kind of confusion because it's just a dynamic they've never had to really deal with. So I
Yeah.
don't think it would have felt as normal or natural if we didn't have them have this confusion for a little bit after the kiss. Will say it was very noticeable that James Van Der Beek had already cut his hair at this point, but they had to
Oh,
kind of
yes, it was.
paste a little hair piece in the back to make his hair look as long as it was when we ended season one. So I love that immediately the next scene is him and Pacey getting haircuts.
Yes, it is, for personal reasons. That scene didn't need to be in there. It didn't need to happen, but story-wise, but
Yes, we
it
need to
had to
show that
happen.
Dawson got a haircut and uh Pacey got frosted tips. So
The frosted tips, and I mean, I know it was a time,
yes.
99, 2000-ish. Frosted tips were big, but do they look any good? Do they
But I
look better
mean,
than his haircut from season one?
I think
Probably.
this looks a lot better than the Caesar haircut we had in season 1.
Yeah,
But I will
it
say
probably does.
we do have a character calling him out for the frosted tips, so I
That
think
is true.
it's fair. Um, but yeah, no, after this kiss, they do have that weird kind of like, "I don't know, what does this mean?" And Dawson kind of awkwardly says, "We'll sleep on it," and then just, like, pretend like it never happened. And so, obviously, that's not what
Mm.
Joey wanted to hear, so she leaves. She goes to leave, and then he pulls her back and says, "No, you're not going anywhere." And they proceed to make out some more. So,
I don't know
yeah,
if we've noticed. I don't know if we've noticed, Janine. Dawson doesn't choose his words very wisely,
he
does
does
he? You
not.
see,
No,
he,
he really
he says
doesn't.
things like, "Oh no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything."
Yeah,
It's like, what do you mean it doesn't
and
mean
like it never
anything? Of course, it
happened.
means something.
Yeah, it never
Like,
happened.
you can't just come out and say that. How about saying, "Let's sleep on it," and think a little bit deeper about what's going on.
Yes,
That's
yes.
what we should say, isn't it, Dawson?
But
Not,
they
I know he's 15 and he's supposed to be 15. He just looks 35 and
well,
he's
they're
still off
16
putting.
now. They're 16 now.
Oh,
They're
sorry. Oh, that's right.
juniors
Yes,
in
yes.
high school. They're in 11th grade now. So, um, yeah, they have this moment and they seem like they've settled into okay. They still haven't really kind of decided what they are, but they
No.
know that they like what is happening.
Yes, they
Um,
want to spend time rolling around on a bed with each other and getting caught by Dawson's parents.
well,
Is that
that's
in the
episode
first
no,
episode?
no, no, that's the beginning of episode 2.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
but I do like we get this kind of fun scene of, Dawson kind of relaying all of the information to Pacey and Joey relaying all the information to Bessie, and I like that we're actually getting a lot of Bessie here kind of being this mother
Yeah.
figure. So even, like, when Joey's getting ready for her date, she's giving her some great advice, and we get a nice moment with them. So I like building Joey's world more in that way. We're getting to see more of the Bessie character and how she kind of fills that role for Joey as a mother figure. So I liked that we got a lot of opportunities for scenes like that between the two of them. But it was just kind of a fun guys versus girls kind of scene. Which we did also get something similar again, I believe, in episode 2 with Gail and Mitch,
Yes.
which was a
And
fun little juxtaposition.
they're different conversations with
But
both
very,
Dawson on
very,
Mitch's point
yeah,
and Joey on, from with Gail
yeah,
about their impending relationship.
yeah.
Um, it is interesting that you get that, but again, I find, and I said I was kind of starting to say this. The episode's called The Kiss. The Kiss is about Dawson and Joey. They are the center of this episode and how they are navigating the first week or so of
Yeah.
actually realizing that they're going to become something and annoying each other and then getting up and starting, kissing each other in the school hallway again and doing all that kind of stuff. But I am way more interested in everything else going on in this episode.
Okay.
Pacey's new friend, who he
Okay.
doesn't like, but
Yeah.
he really clearly does like, and are definitely going to get together. This Andy girl, um, because it's all very. I mean, it starts when she bashes into him in her car.
Yes, so we see Pacey leave the hair salon with his frosted tips. He's trying to get with the girl, Christy,
That's right.
played by Ali Larter, who ends up, hitting on James Vanderbeek in Varsity Blues, if you remember that far back when we covered it on Morgan
Yeah,
Has Seen. When
I
we were doing, I
remember
think
Varsity
yes.
Blues. Oh, the quote. What was the quote? I don't want your life.
Yes, I don't want your life. Yeah.
Ah,
Very, very memed line at the time.
oh God, I
We
love it.
did cover it, I believe, when we did a series on teen movies. Um, so, all leading up to, I think we did, like, ended the series with Not Another Teen Movie, which was a fun series.
That's
So
right.
please go check that out. Morgan hasn't seen. But yes, Ali Lauder obviously was in that film with James Vanderbeek. So, she's here in this show as a senior cheerleader girl that Pacey um is lusting after and obviously still playing into his attraction to older women, which I do believe Andy
Older.
says
I
some
mean, 1 year older. I mean,
I
come on. It's not
still older.
still. Yeah.
But and then I think even in the second episode, Andy alludes to some line about him being with older women, and he kinda has to just, like, make a face and roll his eyes. So I love the continuity of, like, little moments where they're just kinda like, you know,
Mm.
reminding us of Pacey's history. But yeah, so he is in his brother's squad car. So, he's feeling cool. He gets in the squad car. He's trying to get the attention of Christy. As he pulls out, Andy hits him with her car and he pretends to be a cop and kind of gives her a hard time. So then
Yeah, but it's
later,
very,
yeah,
it's very kind of half. flirty, isn't it? It's
Yeah, it's a little
half
playful, but she thinks he's a
playful.
cop, and so he's just like but he's having fun just kind of messing with her. So then
Which is
she
why
actually
I immediately think, okay, these two are going to end up together because it's a bit
yes.
of an awkward meet cute
Yes, that kind
situation.
of antagonistic relationship. So, um, she hears him in the hall kind of bragging about what he did and tricking her
Yeah.
to a bunch of guys, and so, that's so she's like, "Oh, Officer Pacey, huh?" kind of thing. And so this is where the kind of back and forth sparring happens between the 2. Which even like it already kind of comes to a nice place in the 2nd episode. So we're gonna get this really fun balance with the 2 of them where they're constantly bickering, but there's obviously a little bit of care there or understanding of each other or wanting to understand each other. So
Yeah,
obviously
I
I
mean
think
that
that's enough to lead your mind where your mind is already going. So
exactly, which is why I'm again becoming, I think, with the latter part of season one, far more deeply interested in Pacey as a character than
yeah.
most anybody else, really.
Yes.
Um, because I do think we know the least about him generally after that first season.
Yeah.
So any little bit of depth we get, any little bit of time we spend with him kind of on his own in his own scene, aside from the other three main people, is interesting to me with this new dynamic. I mean, how many times has the bickering half friendly relationship between two people resulted in a passionate fire brewing underneath? The
Yeah.
cauldron is bubbling and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's told time and time and time again. Um, and look, I don't know, but it seems very obvious to me that this is going to end up in some sort of passionate affair situation.
Um,
Um,
yeah, so, you're not far off
I'm not.
there.
If I'm not far off,
Oh,
then that's fine. But it's interesting to see. It's fun to see, and he is definitely in the second episode, especially. I must say as well, is becoming much more, I suppose, outspoken in his actual feelings and much
yeah,
more embracing of maybe not embracing of who he is, but a realization that he is who he is, if that kind of makes sense. And he's able to voice that, he's able to actually vocalize to other
yeah,
people his own feelings regarding what those people, the population of Cape Side kind of think of him and
yeah,
his
mhm,
disappointment in that, his kind of disenfranchisedness about that. Um, and I like that about him. I like that he's being a little bit more open. I like that we're getting constantly more and more time with him. Um, and it's definitely one of the most interesting aspects of this first episode is this new dynamic he has. I mean, also I'm find myself quite focused on Jen and Grams again in this first
yeah,
episode and
yeah, it's a
trying
really
to get over the day after, the grandfather's just died, like we saw him at the
yeah,
end of season one. And Grams is kind of immediately fine
selling
and
his clothes and,
selling his clothes.
yeah, and just kind of being very casual about everything, and Jen is really struggling, so she's like, "How can she just be so nonchalant about this?" But this woman has had months, years to mourn him as he's been in this kind of comatose state for all of this
Yeah.
time. So, I think she's already given her time to grieve him, to mourn him, um, because he's really hasn't been there this whole time, and obvious
And I
her
think
being
that does happen. I think
yeah.
that does happen with people who are in states like that,
Mhm.
or, say older relatives in real life, right?
Mhm.
That end up with, whether it's in a coma state or end up with kind of dementia or things like that, it's a much longer grieving process because you're able to kind of realize that they become not who they were,
Yeah.
and that person who they were, who was your older relative, for example, I've gone through this, kind of no longer exists.
Yeah.
Um, so when the passing away does occur, I think obviously it's not easy, but it's not a. I suppose it can be a shock, but it's not necessarily this kind of sudden. Every bit of emotion comes out all at once, and this is absolutely devastating because it's been this long
Drawn
devastation
out thing. Yeah.
rather than this quick one, which is where Grams obviously comes from in this whole discussion.
Yeah.
She's had plenty of time to really mourn the slow passing of her husband, and it's understandable from her point of view, and we get more understanding of her point of view again in this first
Yeah.
episode, which I like. The balance
Yeah.
of that,
Yes.
because Jen doesn't really understand that. She is treating it as this short-term
Shock and
shock.
heartache, yeah, so she really doesn't understand it, so it is kind of another turning point in their relationship. They have quite a few where they ultimately, have to kind of meet each other in the middle in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
and I think by the end of this first episode, they do kind of have this understanding, so, um, getting into how they kind of get to their, resolution, um yeah, Dawson and Joey decide they're gonna go on a date.
they do.
Um, and yeah, so as Dawson is, on his way to pick up Joey for a date, they're gonna go to their theater, the Rialto. It's closing down. They're they're gonna shut it down, and so they're doing one last film, and they're showing the last picture show. So they decide that's gonna be their
Terrible
date.
idea to close down such a nice cinema.
Yes, which I think they end up replacing it with another theater.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's stupid,
Um,
but okay.
so, Dawson goes to Jen to bring her, like, a casserole that his mom had made, and she is just kind of sitting on the porch, like, bumming out, and she's like, "Oh, you look nice," and he tells her he's going to the Rialto with Joey and doesn't really, make a big deal about it being a date or anything to her. She informs him that Grams is gonna be going, and he said, "Oh, are you going too?" She's like, "No, I'm just gonna sit here out here and curse the world." And so he's like, "Well, maybe you should get out there and do something." So he just kind of tried to encourage her a little bit to at least go out and do something. And, so Dawson picks up Joey for the date. It's super cute. But I also like the conversation that Joey and Bessie have before this. So she's talking to
Yeah.
her about the different kinds of kisses. The first kiss is kind of all wrapped
Mm,
up with passion and excitement and exhilaration. But then there's the second kiss. That's the rational kiss where you've had time to think about it and reflect. And kiss is actually like a decision. It's not driven by kind
yeah.
of lust or passion. It's driven by rational thought. And you're now choosing this moment to, we've sat on this other kiss, we've slept on it. Now do we want to kiss again? So um if the second kiss is good, so Bessie's kind of like, most people like that first passionate kiss. I like the second one. So it's kind of this thing, hence the episode title and all of that. So I like that we kind of are emphasizing, the significance of a kiss and the differences. So then now this date is kind of almost building up to how this second rational kiss is going to go. So he
Yeah.
picks her up and they have this kind of cute moment. He picks a little flower for her and um they're kind of being flirty and very much this line was like the line that they were using in all the promos for this Dawson's Creek season 2 premiere. And it was this whole kind of playing the song that they play
Mm.
um in the episode and Dawson saying, I would really like to hold your hand. And that was like on a loop in the promos
I
for
love how you just
season 2.
distinctly remember that.
I do. Like it was yesterday. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, so I would really like to hold your hand, and it was very cute and sweet, and we see them get close and linger, but the kiss hasn't happened yet. So there's kind of a lot of moments building up to the second rational kiss.
Yeah.
So they go, and it's really cute. They're on their date, they're watching the movie, they're looking at each other, they're holding hands. And then here comes Jen to come sit with them.
Mm.
And Dawson's like,
Let's
"Oh, hey."
let's make things awkward immediately.
Yes, and so he's like, "Oh, you're why don't you go sit with your grandma?" And she's like, "Oh, well, I thought I'd come sit with you guys. And then, we could go to the ice house later to get some food. I just took your advice to come out." And
Mm.
Dawson's like, my advice?" And he kind of looks at Joe, and he's like, I don't know what she's talking about."
He
And
does, which is harsh because for that one scene when he's actually speaking to Jen and saying things like, "At this moment in time, I think you just need a friend,"
yeah,
and uh, you know, encouraging her to kind of get out of her own head and
yeah,
things like that. Very, very good person at that point,
yeah.
but then immediately spoils himself as usual. Again, by
Like, I don't know
saying,
what she's
"Oh,
talking about.
I don't
And
know,
and
some
yes,
weirdo over here.
yes,
I don't know what she's talking
right?
about."
And Joey is visibly kind of annoyed because, she's been competing with this
Obviously.
girl all season 1. So she's finally gotten her guy, and now here comes Jen again. So she's just very kind of annoyed. So Jen kind of reads that it's not, it's more than what she thought. They actually are on a date, that Joey's maybe not liking it. So then she feels embarrassed, and she's like, "Oh, I must be interrupting. I'll go." And so she kind
Yeah.
of runs out. And so then Dawson feels like he needs to go talk to her. So Joey's like, "Okay, he's leaving me for this girl again." That's kind of her mentality. And Dawson goes and talks to Jen. And Jen is kind of reminiscing that her and Dawson had their first date there, and now they're tearing it down. So what does that mean? And
Let's
he
remind ourselves that Jem was the one who ended it for no reason. But
Exactly. Yes.
we'll forget
No, no,
about
no,
that.
but she
We'll
won't
just
really
forget
take,
about
yes,
that.
and then she kind of wanted him back a little too late. And she was like very much like Pacey, seeing the kind of hints that, Joey had feelings for Dawson.
And while I find Jen very, very interesting, she's becoming increasingly more equal to Dawson in terms of annoying character choices.
Yes. So which is why when she kind of ends up veering towards another character, it's kind of fun.
Yes.
It's kind of fun.
Well, it might be
Um
fun, but it's also a bit like,
no.
"What we're
No, no, no,
doing,
no, no,
this
no.
is so
Yes.
annoying."
No, I'm not talking about the character you think. Um
Ah, somebody else.
yes.
Ah,
So, yeah, she will become pretty y unlikable,
annoying.
maybe really, kind of
What's the
frustrating,
point?
as she kind of veers into her New York self as she hangs out with Abby. Um
I don't need any more major characters in Dawson's Creek to be annoying, please, Janine.
Well, okay. Well, she won't be as bad as Dog, but she'll be definitely be frustrating because this was like her own making, and now she's kind of like trying to play a victim a little bit. So that's a little
Yeah.
obnoxious. So yeah, she's kind of trying to make Dawson feel bad. He all but tells her that like it's a thing now with him and Joey.
Oh, yeah.
And so she gets really upset and storms off. So then Dawson goes back inside to see Joey, and she's gone. So now he has to kind of go and find her. Oh, and we also didn't mention that, the whole thing was, oh, she was going to go to Paris. And she gave up Paris
Yes,
to
of course.
stay
Yeah, she
and be
gave
with
up
Dawson.
Paris.
Yes.
Which
So,
wasn't talked about at great length. It was more of just, "I think I've made a terrible decision." And Dawson's like, "What? Is it me?" And she's just like, "I decided not to go to France." Oh, yay, let's all
yes. And
hug
she
each
says it
other.
all cute and flirty and like, yeah.
She
So
does.
great,
It's
great
a
thing.
bit like, if I was being a cynic, it would be a bit vomit, vomit, vomit. But I'm not. I'm being nice, and I'm going,
Okay.
"That's
Well, I
actually quite
appreciate that
sweet."
I appreciate you appreciating that. But
However, I
then
think she should have gone to France.
she should have. She definitely should have. So then we cut back to kind of what I was mentioning with this this kind of situation being a stepping stone for Jen and Grams.
Mm,
So the movie kind of ends, and Jen is sitting in the back looking miserable. She sees her Grams, and she calls her out for like her reaction to Grandpa's death and how
yeah,
she's not really seeming all that sad about it. And she's like, "Well, I came here to be with him. Like, we had our first date here, and, I've made my peace with him being gone, but he'll always be with me, and I love him." But, and Jen kind of feeling like she has nobody. And so Graham reminds her, "Well, your grandfather's gone. You are all I have left."
yeah,
And Jen saying, "I think Grams, you might be the only friend I have, my only friend in the world, and I think you might hate me." So just even her having this feeling that her Grams doesn't like her or even love her, um, and her being kind of the only friend she has, it's a really kind of sad state to see Jen be in.
it
But
is, yeah,
Grams reassures her. She's like, "No, you're everything to me. You're all I have left, and I'm going to cherish that relationship with you." And she kind of takes her hand and that whole kind of thing. So it's a nice moment where Grams reminds Jen that, "No, I love you. Of course I love you. So don't think anything different." And so Jen kind of being receptive to that. So I liked that they had a little bit of moment to grow their relationship in this episode.
yeah.
But then,
You promised this would continue to
yes.
happen, and it shows, I think it will in many
Yes, yes. It
ways.
becomes a
But
really kind of sweet thing.
if
But yes, then we
Jen
cut.
starts becoming a bit more wild and a bit more New York
Yeah.
Jen, then how's that gonna go? Because that is exactly
Yes.
what Grams
So
hates.
yes, and especially kind of her little declaration at the end of episode 2, which we'll get to. But,
Oh, that's right, yes.
yeah. So then we cut to Dawson finally finding Joey and apologizing, and, she kind of talks about really being disappointed about Paris. So I like that she actually addresses that it's something she really
Yeah,
wanted to do, that she could kind of reinvent herself and start over. She wouldn't have to be this girl that people look at and know her whole life story and judge and all of this kind of thing. She could totally have a new experience and be this whole different person. Um, so, I like that she didn't just give it up and is fine with her decision with Dawson and is not upset about it at all, because she seemed really secure and happy about it in the beginning of the episode. So I like that we do get a moment of her actually really admitting that, no, that's something I really wanted. And, I really had plans for myself for kind of reinventing myself with this. So,
yeah, which
what
would
is it?
be a great thing for
Yeah.
Joey to do. We have
Yes.
to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Is Dawson worth it? The answer is no.
Yeah. Yeah.
The answer
So
is no now when it looks all fine and good now.
yeah,
But even
exactly.
certainly after the next episode as well, the answer's definitely
Oh,
no.
yeah, yeah. So, I like that she's honest about that she really was upset about not going. And so Dawson tries to be cute and say, "Oh, Cape Side has just as good a things as France," and he's doing
No, it
everything,
doesn't.
naming all of the different things, as they walk by the waterside, and saying it in a little French accent, and they get to the swings, and they're having a cute moment on the swing set and talking about all these different French things, and then they have the second rational kiss,
They do, yes. On
and
a swing set like they're 12, not
yes.
16.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the start of their relationship, is as
It
children and
is.
grow up into so
That's
it's kind of a callback, I would assume, to their relationship. So
when
they
was the
have
last
this.
time you went on a swing? Don't know why I just thought about that.
I
Um,
mean,
I can't remember. I think I'd be terrified to go on a swing.
no, I went
I'd
on
end
a
up falling
swing.
off.
I went on a swing actually earlier this year.
A swing?
Yes.
Like a
No,
children's swing?
it wasn't wholly for children.
Are you sure?
My friend my sister's friend, her apartment complex has, like, a little park area with a pool. So we went to the pool, and then after the pool, my nephew wanted to play in, like, the little park area, and they had a swing set, and the swings were, like, big enough swings for people my size to fit on them. So I went on the swing.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
You didn't fall off.
no, I didn't. No. Um, thank God. But, yeah, so they have this cute little kiss on the swing, and that's kinda how the episode ends,
Yeah.
uh, is the second rational kiss that we were building to. So, yeah, I
But
mean,
they've made the
I think
choice. They've made the
yes.
choice now. That's
Yes.
what all that's
So that
about.
is kind of what that solidifies. So, episode 1, season 2, how are you feeling at this point, Morgan?
Yeah, I'm reasonably positive about the central relationship, I think,
Okay.
because as we said, they've made that choice. They've got over first little humps of is this a good idea? Decided that yes, it is a good idea. But again, I'm find myself drawn to what Jen's struggles and what Jen's going through because
Mhm.
she's still not really okay at the
Yeah.
end of the episode. She's reassured, but she's not really okay,
No.
and interested in what Pacey's going to do in. I suppose I would imagine I'd like this season to be Pacey finding himself,
Okay.
and I feel like it might to get there with what this episode was for him. And I like that. I
If I'm
like that.
remembering correctly, this season also has a couple of my favorite episodes as well.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah. Um, but yes, so that's episode 1 of
It
season
is.
2. The
Well,
kiss,
yes, as we move in to season 2, episode 2, of course, called Crossroads,
crossroads.
I
Yes.
feel like we should also mention that Mitch and Gail have
Oh,
quite a bit to
yes.
do in these first 2 episodes, Dawson's
Oh,
parents,
yes.
obviously.
So, yes, and their just little bit of story in episode 1 is, Gail really trying to be intimate with Mitch and him just kind of
Yeah,
blowing her off in that aspect. He just can't be comfortable being intimate with her yet, and her kind of getting frustrated, and then she discovers that he has actually been talking to divorce lawyers. So,
yeah.
he kind of he's telling her everything's fine, he's telling her he wants to work on things, he doesn't want a divorce, but yet when she tries to, you know, make things better, be intimate with him, these things, he's not really receptive to it. So she's getting a lot of mixed messages. And I feel
Yeah.
like at this point, she's very much like, if you are done with me, just tell me you're done with me, but don't tell me
Mm.
everything's fine. And then you're having all these thoughts and feelings and you're not being receptive to me. Um,
And they both go to seek kind of friendly advice, and it's,
yeah.
it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to kind of mull over
Yeah.
their dynamic because there's obviously still not. I mean, it's the mistrust obviously comes with good reason from
Yeah.
Mitch, with very good reason, right? Sure, but it's it's I like that they still desire to want to be okay.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a case of get back to how things were, but it's build and
Yes,
still move on together.
move on together after what has happened. Because yeah, they do kind of seek counsel in the way that Joey and Dawson were at the beginning of the episode. So Grams comes back over to bring the casserole dish that the 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 Learys gave her after the
Yeah,
death of her husband. And she decides to kind of ask her some advice about what to do because Mitch is not being receptive to her. And Mitch,
I wouldn't be
he
talking to Grams about intimate
yes,
relationships
so
either.
I love Grams's reaction when Gail is kind of talking about the things she's done, maxing out her Victoria's Secret credit card and buying all kinds of intimate toys, and Grams is like, "Oh, I was just talking about, like, renewing your vows or something." Um, and Mitch, when he's meeting with his friend, he's kind of implying that he should maybe have an open marriage. That's the friend's advice.
Mm,
Yes.
which is
Which
an
is something,
interesting way to go.
yes, and it's something that Mitch actually considers. So, yeah, so, Mitch and Gail are kind of in a really weird place right now
They
themselves.
are. And
Yes.
that's their story in the second episode as well,
Yes,
is
yes.
them seeking this advice and coming to this
Yes.
question of should they have an open relationship, which is
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes going forward. But yes,
Yes.
synopsis time, please, I think.
Yes. All right. Crossroads. Just between friends. Dawson and Joey's newfound affection hits its first crossroad when Joey discovers that Dawson has invaded her personal privacy, but he is too consumed with malice and torment by the horrible things he has unearthed to consider forgiving her. Meanwhile, when Pacey's childhood friends are too distracted by their own predicament to remember his all important 16th birthday, he sets out to expand his horizons. And Abby convinces a downhearted Jen to unleash the wild side she hoped had been left behind in New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What was the phrase that was used there? Unearthed horrors beyond repair or something like that.
Mm.
What was please tell me what the exact phrasing of that was again.
But he is too consumed with malice and torment by the horrible things he has unearthed to consider forgiving her.
Malice and torment. Consumed by malice and torment with the horrible things, the horrible things that aren't really that
That he
horrible.
unearthed.
That he unearthed as though it's unforgivable and ridiculous. Right. Okay, here we go. Shock horror and
Yes.
everything
So
like that. The structure of Dawson's Creek. As soon as you think everything's okay with Dawson, he goes and does something
really
not
dumb.
only ridiculously idiotic, but also, treats it very, very selfishly. And what is the one thing we shouldn't be doing? It's reading other people's personal, private journals
Yeah.
and diaries and what have you. What does he immediately do on like week 2 of their relationship? He's just, oh, I'm just going to read. I know everything about you, Joey, so I'm just going to read your diary. Well, if you think you
Yes.
know everything about her, Dawson, you don't need to do
Need to
that, do
read
you? But no,
exactly.
you're going
You
to
do
do
it
it
anyway. Yes,
anyway.
yes, yes. So he's at her house. They're studying. They're being cutesy and cuddly. And oh, well, no, actually, the episode opens, I believe, with
Well, I'm getting caught.
yes. So
Yeah.
we're just seeing the like home shopping network talking about this sausage device.
Oh God, right. I mean, come on.
So it's implying to us that it is very late in the evening that we're getting these infomercials just playing, and
Yes.
nobody's paying attention to these infomercials playing, and we cut to Dawson
Talking
and
about sausages, let's just
yes,
remind
yes.
ourselves as well, as though
And
it's
and as they are vigorously, making out, this
vigorous.
infomer
Yes, I mean it
yes,
is. It is vigorous.
this infomercial is going. And then we see a hand reach down and turn off the TV that implores them to like look around. They see mom and dad watching them, and he's like, and Dawson's reaction, "Oh hey, mom and dad, you remember Joey, right?" Like they've known her all her whole life, but they have not known her in this capacity as
No,
Dawson's girlfriend. So to see them, sleeping in each other's beds and being alone in a room together all of the time as they always were, but now adding in this context of them constantly making out, Mitch and Gail are concerned. Do you think they're rightfully
terrified.
concerned, or do you think they're being too making a too big a deal of it?
Uh, I mean, I don't necessarily think they're making too big a deal of it. No, I think they end up making an awkward deal of it with how they go about giving the advice they give.
Yeah,
It's a bit like Eugene Levy in American Pie levels of awkward advice, right?
yeah,
But the meaning behind it, the is is understandable. It is there
yeah,
for a reason, and there's nothing wrong with that. But obviously, they're terrified. Like I understand it. I'm not
yeah,
on the side of Dawson and Joey. That's just like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. Like you kind of do. You're 16. You kind of do have to realize some potential. Not that anything's happened, not that anything will happen. I don't
Yeah,
know,
no,
or anything
Dawson's
like that.
reaction is very funny when his dad's trying to be all serious, and he's like, "Dad, we're just making out, like, chill
Yeah,
out."
which is understandable
Yes.
again, but you I suppose you get caught in two minds very much with this kind of conversation. Again, when it happens kind of in the real world, if it does happen,
Yeah,
or in the fictional world, of actually understanding both sides,
yeah,
where as a 16-year-old, the last thing you want to be talking to your own parents about is that kind of thing.
yeah,
Probably as a parent, the last thing you want to be talking to your 16-year-old about is that
yeah,
kind of thing. But you understand the concern, but you also understand the "please just leave me alone" side
yeah,
of it. Um, Although I do think if the advice is given in a less textbook way than it seems to be given by
yeah,
both of them in this, in this particular episode, then it's a little bit more palatable. Like, you can't just be bringing out a book of pregnancy and things
yeah,
like that. You can't be doing that sort of thing. Treat it
yeah,
like you're a human being and not like you're some sort of concept, I think.
yes.
Um, so from the advice point of view, I think it's understandable but done
Well-meaning.
pretty poorly.
Yes, they're a little bit overbearing about it, as opposed to kind of being more natural, so
But
it's
they have
very.
their own issues to be thinking about, as we've
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah, and I mean, Dawson obviously, like, you guys were humping all over the house, so and now
And
you
they
wanna
were,
tell
yes.
me about, propriety and morals and all this kinda thing. Which, I mean, just knowing Dawson and Joey from the time that we've known them, they're not ready for that, and they don't seem like they're
God,
ready for that,
no.
and yeah, so, uh, Joey particularly and especially, she is very, she knows her mind, she knows what she wants, she knows what she doesn't want, so she would be very sure, of not of needing to be very ready for something like that. So
Mm.
I think the parents are forgetting, like, who these kids are also. They're just kinda getting swept up in the surface of it all.
I must say as well, I mean, credit to Dawson's Creek itself as a show, and Kevin Williamson and everybody else for actually having these discussions regarding 16-year-old Americans,
Yeah.
because that's obviously that is underage in
Yes.
the US, right?
Mhm.
Um, it is not the age of consent.
Yeah.
Is not 16. In Britain, it is 16 if
Mm.
you are both 16 and all that business. So it's fine. So I kind of I expect it more and more. It's less of a shock when I see it in British teen shows that it's
Yeah.
very frankly talked about than I do in American, because historically Americans are very prudish. Well, this is just what I find in terms of TV and things like this, and teen things in particular. It's all very, like, the only time I ever heard about conversations regarding abstinence and things like that were from American shows. They weren't from British
Oh,
shows.
okay.
British shows are much more open about that sort of stuff. So, I credit Dawson's Creek with actually being able to have
Have
mature conversations about this
Yes,
kind of
about those
stuff.
things, yes, and parents having really awkward conversations about those things. But
Because it's
yeah,
not like
I'm
it doesn't happen with 16-year-old Americans with each other,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Of course it
100%,
does.
100%. But yeah, so then they're at Joey's house studying and being all cute and cuddly, and Dawson talking about, like, he loves how it's so easy for them. They don't have to worry about the kind of boring getting to know each other stuff because they know everything about each
Yeah,
other. And he brags that he knows everything about her, and she's like, "Oh, you think you know everything about me, huh?"
very
Um,
bold.
yes, very bold statement. And as they're kind of having this cuddly moment, she's about to pull out her journal and kind of
Mm,
write about the funny day of his parents kind of trying to give them this advice. But before she can actually write anything down, he starts kissing her, whatever. But then her little brother starts crying, or her nephew starts crying.
yeah,
So then she goes to check on him, and the journal's just sitting there. So then Dawson decides to open it up and he
like
reads
an idiot.
it, and something in there upsets him. And then he's like, "I gotta go." And she's like, "Well, what's wrong?" He's like, I just gotta go." And he's just kind of cold with her and leaves. And she's very confused.
She called my movie bad. Oh,
Yes.
get
So
over yourself, you wet wipe.
we don't find out what he read until later. So we see
He's a
Pacey.
wet lettuce. He's a wet wipe. He's wetter than a fish that's underneath the ocean.
Oh my god. Yes. So we meet up with Pacey, who is just it's his 16th birthday, and he's just failed his driver's test by 1 point.
Terrible,
And he
terrible thing
actually
to happen on your
studied.
birthday.
Yes, and he's like, that's what happens when you study. So he's just annoyed because he actually tried.
Mm.
So he's really upset about it, and he's talking to Jen, and then, Jen's like, "What's wrong, Pacey?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm having a case of the Molly Ringwald." So I love that she kind of goes through the different Molly
Yes, I
Ringwald
like that. I
iterations.
like that.
And then she
Yes.
lands on 16 Candles. And, obviously she wouldn't really know anything about Pacey's birthday. So I think it's
No.
fair for her to have this conversation with him, which is also a dynamic I like to see, which is a dynamic that will grow in some interesting ways going forward.
Okay.
Some little fun little things between Joey and or Jen and Pacey. We'll
Is
see
it
in the
because
future.
they're both the wild ones?
Yes, exactly. So some little fun, little interesting things will happen with the two of them down the line. But yeah, I think she's the perfect person to have this conversation. Obviously, he won't be upset with her for not remembering his birthday because she's new and she
Yeah.
wouldn't know that about him. So, and she kind of just has this, and she's like, "Well, happy birthday, Pacey." So she kind of gives him a nice little happy birthday, and she kind of implores him, reinvent yourself because, obviously our friends are too busy to pay attention to us.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they're both a bit like
you're
feeling
bitter.
that, which you can understand. You can also understand Dawson and Joey's point of view of being very focused on
Them in this
themselves and
relationship and that
their
whole
own
kind of thing.
dynamic.
And being whole wrapped up in this thing because it was such this big build up for them and build up for us
Yeah.
as an audience. So you kind of get why they're
Obviously, you
wrapped
can
up in it.
understand it,
Yeah. Yes,
but
100%.
it's still you don't want to be
You
forgetting
don't
your
wanna
best
be
friend's
forgetting your
16th
friends.
birthday.
Yes. And so I love this kind of candid conversation where Pacey says he's happy for them, and Jen, like, through gritted teeth, like, "Yeah, me too." And he's like, "No, you aren't." And she's like, "No, I'm not." So I love this honest moment between the two of them as well. And so she kind of implores him to reinvent himself. So he decides to have a big, like, dock party and just invite all
Yeah.
these people for his birthday. So before this, like, I think it was, like, right after he had found out he failed his test, he runs into
Mm.
Dawson, and Dawson's complaining about what he read, and this is when we find out that he read that Joey hates his movie. She thinks it's like, drivel, and he's just like a Spielberg
Putrid, I
wannabe.
think one of the words was used. I like
Yes.
that.
And so she kind of was going off about how terrible she thought his movie was that he made.
Hilarious, because it was.
Yes, and he's whining and complaining, and Pacey's, like, annoyed. He's like, "You have nothing to tell me today?" He's like, "No, what do I need to tell you?" He's like, "I failed my driver's test today of all days." And he's like, "Oh, well, you'll take it again in a couple weeks. So anyway, me and Joey, da 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 da," kind of thing. And so Pacey's rightfully pissed. So then he meets with Jen, has that conversation. So then we see him again. Now he's handing out flyers because he's gonna just have this big party. Um, and so, Dawson comes back for more advice because I think he ends up kind of giving it away to Joey that he knows. So
Mm.
he kind of just makes up an excuse and is like, "Oh, I found the costume that you wore in my movie in my closet when I was cleaning. And it just had me thinking about it and how great you were in it. And then it had me thinking about like what you thought of it. Like, did you actually like the movie?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, I thought it was great. Dawson, like I told you that. You know that I love your movie." And then he keeps kind of probing and asking more and more questions. He's like, "But you wouldn't think it was like putrid and da 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 da." And he's like using specific words that she wrote. And then she clocks it and realizes, "You read my journal." And he's just trying to justify it by the things she said, which is like, "No, it doesn't matter. Like, none of that
There's no
matters. You
justification for it.
exactly, you invaded my privacy." And so she's rightfully pissed off. And he's still trying to like be a little bit of the victim. And Dawson is just like the
But
worst
I
right now.
understand I understand why he would be upset, but he
Yeah.
shouldn't have put himself in that situation in the
Yeah,
first place.
exactly.
This is where
Exactly.
ignorance is bliss, Dawson.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
stop snooping and being nosy when everything's fine. Stop looking for things that might end
Exactly.
up wrong.
Exactly. So he goes a little too far with that and is terrible. So then he runs back to Pacey for advice. And
Pacey's very
Pacey,
cold and short
oh
with him, and I
yes,
like it.
yes, and we love it. We love when Pacey's just like, nobody cares, Dawson. Like, why don't you just shut up about your own problems? Nobody cares.
Oh dear. It's
And
great.
yes. And I think is this where he comes to the realization that it's Pacey's birthday and he forgot all about it.
I think so, yes, and he's trying to grovel and he's trying to beg and he gets on his hands and knees and starts crawling and kissing Pacey's feet. He doesn't actually
No, he
do
doesn't
that,
do
but he
any of
might as
that.
well be doing
No.
that. Pacey's
Yes.
not interested.
No, so I love that Pacey it just tells him what's what. It's always nice when somebody tells Dawson what the hell is what because he's so
Although
right.
Pacey's frosted tips aren't as frosted in this episode, and I was wondering why.
Because I think he probably was just like a fakey thing before he went back to his brown hair. But
So
I
it's
think no.
one episode of
Oh yes,
frosted
well no. By
tips.
the end of the episode, Andy runs into him at the store because it was the whole thing with Christy. I don't even think we talked about that. That um Christy actually was like friendly to Andy and got to know her. So he's like, you know
Oh,
Christy?
that's right.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Christy and so Andy promised to set him up with Christy, but Andy told the lie that like he was dying, a heart strike
Yeah.
that strangles his heart. And so Christy was only nice to him because she took pity on him. And so
And
then he
she has a
runs into
boyfriend anyway.
yes, and she has a boyfriend. So he runs into Andy at the store, and she kind of laughs at how she just made up this joke, and so she kind of gets him back for the whole him pretending to be a police officer, and so they have this kind of fun little back and forth, and then she tells him, "This is the hair dye you should use. Put it on your hair for 20 minutes because yeah, these frosted tips aren't working for you," and so she gives him the stuff to put on his
Oh,
hair.
that's
So
right.
he does put his hair back to normal before this next episode.
But it still isn't Caesar. So
Yes, yes. So,
good.
yeah, he's having this beach party and he's kind of miserable because nobody knows him, nobody's there for him. Andy shows up and she's kind of like, not being nice to him. And, people are bumping into him and the girl that he thought was checking him out is off with some other guy and people are just kind
It's
of being rude to
it's an
him and
excuse for the youth of Cape Side to just have fun with each other
exactly. So they're
regardless
not
of
there
him.
for him. Yeah, they're not there for him. They're there for a party. And so then, at school, we see Jen, trying to get out of PE by saying she has her period or whatever. So she's like having to
Mm,
pick up all the old clothes and stuff in the bleachers. Meanwhile, Abby is just filing her nails, chilling in the bleachers. And she talks about how she stole letterhead from her doctor's office. So she just made up some disease that she has. So she doesn't have to do cleanup duty as well. She can just sit back. And so then, she kind of challenges Jen on, "Oh, I don't think you were as cool as New York as you say you were. Did you go to this and that club?" And Jen's like bragging about, "Oh, I dated the bouncer at that club. And this other club is, so 5 minutes ago." And so
let's also
Abby,
just take a point here. I dated the bouncer at a New York nightclub when I was 15,
by 14,
probably
yes.
14. Bouncer, prison.
Well,
Prison with the
he might not
bouncer.
know that because he might not know that. He might have not had the brains and thought to ask her that. And if she's dressing older, wearing makeup, whatever, and
I
obviously
thought, I don't know if it's just me, right? But I can tell when somebody's young. Can you not? Can like
yes, I
the New
can.
York
I
bouncer not?
can, but apparently the New York bouncer is a pig and they
Prison
cannot.
with him. I don't
Yes.
care. Prison with him.
Yes, 100% prison with him, but he was dumb and I guess didn't know. But all of this is just to make Jen sound cooler to small town Abby, who's very
It
impressed.
is, yeah.
So then that's how they start kind of hanging out, and they end up deciding to go to Pacey's
Mm.
dock party and
And get
sneak in some champagne. Yes,
a
so
little bit
Abby has a
leery, a
bottle
little
of
bit wild.
champagne, and they're drinking. They're having a silly time, and um I think Abby sees that Dawson's coming up the stairs, and so she's like, "Jen, I dare you to kiss the first guy who comes up here." Jen does it, and it's Dawson, and he like pulls her off of him. And it's funny because after she kisses him and Dawson has this really negative reaction, Jen is like starting to kind of feel queasy and like embarrassed. And so she stumbles
Yeah.
away. And then like Abby, like being the good friend, but in the whole kind of drunk context is like, "Good going," like, "You jerk," like, kinda thing, and Dawson really didn't do anything. So, yeah,
For once, he
for
actually isn't
once,
at fault.
yeah. So, that's the beginning of this dynamic, this kind of toxic dynamic between Abby and Jen.
Yeah, it's gonna
Um,
be interesting to see. As we said, you say Jen will become frustrating, and I see it because
yeah, because the
I
more
do
time she
see it.
spends with
The
Abby,
increase.
because yeah, and we saw how terrible Abby was in the detention episode,
Mm.
so
But
yeah.
yeah, the increase of poor character choices from Jen, despite okay, some struggles, some genuine
Mhm.
struggles, grieving process, familial issues,
Yeah.
and a breakup for no reason. Sure, but it is going to become I do think a little bit annoying, and
Yes.
in a way that
You're gonna feel for her.
captivates you, in a
You're
way
go
that you
yes.
want to watch
Yes,
it.
you want better for her, but, it's
Exactly.
gonna be
Yeah.
frustrating to see her kind of go down this really negative path. So yeah, she's in this really kind of dark place, getting totally drunk with Abby at this dog party. And then we get the reconciliation between Dawson and Joey, which is like, I don't know,
Very,
very dramatic. It's
very, very dramatic.
raining, and they're on other sides of the dock, and it's slow motion and slow turns and slow water droplets coming down, and this soothing healing song, and it's like so over dramatic,
And
this coming
also
back together of the two of them.
way too quick.
Yes, I would have been way more pissed, and yeah, and for way
Surely.
longer. So they come back together, he apologizes, um, he kind of admits that, he actually does like not knowing everything about her because it's getting to learn more about her and all these kinds of things, and
No, he
I
doesn't though,
he doesn't, no. So he likes that he'll get to learn more about her and those kinds of things,
which
and
is good, yes, but I think he wants to know everything now rather
he
than
probably
take
does, yeah.
time to do that.
Exactly. So they do have their little reconciliation. He admits that he forgot Pacey's birthday and feels really bad about that, and that Pacey doesn't really want to talk to him and that whole kind of thing. So, um, yeah. And then Pacey, he does have this kind of nice moment with Andy at the end of the night where she comes and sits with him and she gives him a gift, a magic eight
Yeah.
ball, and they kind of shake it and ask it different questions. And then she's like shakes the 8 ball to do it, and then she drops it in the water, so it's just like, "Womp womp." So a cute little kind of moment between the 2 of
I
them.
wonder I wonder if the Magic 8 Ball was a pristine gift to give in the year 2000.
I mean, maybe, I mean, she said it was a gift for her brother that she just had forgotten in her car, so it wasn't like a thoughtful kinda gift or anything, um, but yeah, and then we end the episode with Dawson and Pacey, which, like, we haven't really
Mm,
gotten, I like that they had this kind of friendship blow up because we needed to see more of that dynamic, I think.
absolutely.
Um, and so he apologizes, and Pacey's kind of like, "Yeah, like, it's not," and I think he was maybe talking to Andy about this or Jen about this, talking about how, you know, it's not so much that people forgot his birthday, but like you had mentioned, when we were
Mm,
talking earlier about him really just lamenting his status in society in Cape
yeah,
Side, people not expecting anything from him, his family not caring, so, his birthday never really means anything to them, but Dawson would always try to make it special for him. So the fact that
yeah.
Dawson didn't really kind of sucked for him. They had talked about him getting his license and them going down to Providence and having this whole kind of or Maine or whatever and having this whole kind of guys trip celebration. So when
Yeah,
Dawson was too consumed in his own stuff to even remember him, it was just another notch in this town hates me kind of feeling that he was already having.
which
So
is completely understandable. You
yes.
actually visibly see it as well. It's not
Yeah.
just something that's in his own head
Yeah.
either. It is something that is actually present, and you feel so bad for him.
Yes, and then we already kinda see how shitty his brother treats him. We hear about how his father treats him, which we will see going forward, so, his dad is just the worst. Um, But yeah, so then it kinda ends with Dawson trying to make peace with him and apologizing and then saying, "Hey, man, let's just go to Maine now." And so they get in
Mm.
his boat, and he says he's taking him to Maine, and that's how the episode ends. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
meaning
we're
I
in
mean,
it.
that's gonna take that's a fairly lengthy boat trip.
Yeah, right, so I don't know if they're taking the boat. Oh, no, he said he has keys to the Mitch mobile, so, Dawson's gonna be sneaky and steal Mitch's car, and they'll go to Maine,
I
um,
feel like
in the middle of the night.
we're yeah, I feel like it's a really bad idea considering it's not gonna be a short trip, is it really? I mean, I know it's not like, Massachusetts to Philadelphia or somewhere like that, but it's quite a distance. Everything's
Yeah.
quite a distance away
Yes,
in the
I think
US.
they all end up yeah, I think they all end up going to college in Boston, I wanna say.
Well, yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
makes sense. But they're in, like, coastal Massachusetts, which I assume Cape Side is like so you have the Cape,
Mhm.
the Horn of
Yeah.
Massachusetts. As I imagine it's kind of on the general Cape Codish area,
Yeah.
which isn't necessarily close to Maine for just a quick road trip. Like, that's gonna take a day of driving, isn't it,
Yeah,
to
that's
get there?
about
That's gonna take,
yeah.
like, 6 hours. Not
Yeah.
really a quick road trip, and certainly not a
No,
boat trip I would
definitely
want to
not.
be taking.
No. So yeah, I mean, he says, "I'm taking you to Maine right now," and that's how the episode ends, so I don't
It
know.
is, I'm thinking of the logistics, and I probably shouldn't be.
Right,
Okay,
right, we're
fair
thinking a little but
the
they made peace.
they did.
Dawson put some effort in at the end after he got
Again, they
called
shouldn't
out.
have done. People forgive each other too easily in this goddamn
Exactly,
show.
yes. So, but we do kind of set up where we're gonna be, this new kind of budding relationship with Pacey and Andy. Dawson and Joey already being on shaky ground this early on, considering they really know everything about each other and are very familiar with each other. So there shouldn't be too many obstacles, but the fact that they're already getting obstacles should tell you kind of something about the dynamic between their relationship. Um, and Jen kind of going down this darker path with Abby. So that's kind
Mm,
of where our characters are sitting in these
yeah,
early stages of season 2. So,
very interesting, very interesting.
yeah.
I wonder if the structure does change a bit, though. I know the plot's obviously,
Yeah.
develops well, and the plot itself doesn't go back and forth as in obvious terms. I just want the structure of I think maybe Dawson in particular as the lead, as
Yeah.
the title character, to not go through every season beginning, "I'm the worst person ever. I might have some good things. I'm actually the worst person ever. Oh, no, wait, I'm actually alright," which is the
Yeah.
structure of season 1. I
Yeah.
don't and this first 2 episodes have started with, "I'm not a good person again." And where I thought it would be like, let's continue the positivity upwards train of Dawson because he's now in a relationship with Joey that we all wanted because hashtag Team Joey and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'm really
And
curious for you to see.
all of a sudden he's reverted back to the whiny, horrible way he was at the beginning of season 1, which made me absolutely despise the sight of James back.
Yeah. Yes. I'm really curious for you to see season 3, Dawson. I think that's
Oh
that's a
God.
weird yeah. I think I wanna say it's season 3 where all of that kinda interesting stuff happens. But yes, yeah, so I don't know that the structure changes too much. I think we do
Mm,
I think we do lean into some more kind of fun ensemble episodes, I wanna say happening
yeah,
this
you've said
season.
that. You've
Um
said that.
so in terms of that maybe feeling like a different structure, that's what we're getting. But yeah, I think each one of our characters is going to have some pretty decent sized trials this season for
Okay.
sure.
Fair
So,
enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
I'm excited to continue the train of discovering Dawson's
Yeah.
Creek. We hope you're excited to join us for it. Thank you, of course, for joining us now for
Yeah.
another episode of Discovering Dawson's Creek as we've started getting into season 2. Of course, subscribe, ding your
Mhm.
notification bell on this YouTube channel for all the fun stuff we have here. Subscribe, of course, to the main It's a Wonderful podcast feed on all major podcast platforms. It's been scrolling down at the bottom of the screen as well as the social medias, the links of which are in the description. The Patreon and donation links are also down there if you want to support us in that way. All the other fun stuff, yes, you can certainly find in the description. We will be back in a couple of weeks with another episode of Discovering Dawson's Creek,
Yep.
Season 2, Episodes 3 and 4. Janine will be getting the binder back out and
Yeah.
celebrating the craziness to have therein, I suppose. I do think there is only one thing left to do, though, Janine, of course, and I would like not a whiny Dawson impression today. Actually, not a whiny Dawson impression, a stern Pacey impression,
Oh,
please.
no,
It
don't
was
make
my
me do
favourite thing.
Pacey. I love him so much, I can't do
But
a
it
good
was my
Pacey.
favourite thing about the entire 2 episodes, him being very stern. So,
I can't
please,
do him
if you
justice,
will.
I'm sorry. Look away, look away.
This is a sad thing going on right now. I'd just like to point out.
3, 2, 1.
Bye.
Yeah.
Sort your life out, Dawson.